The war was entering its final phase, but the Void Swarm had one last adaptation. Intelligence reports from deep space indicated that the enemy was no longer trying to counter individual tactics. Instead, they were evolving into something entirely new. Dr. Choi Min-jung presented her findings to an emergency meeting of senior officers aboard the flagship. The holographic display showed long-range sensor data that made everyone uncomfortable. "The void entities are merging," she explained, manipulating the three-dimensional star chart. "Individual creatures are combining into larger collective organisms. Based on these readings, we estimate they're forming a single massive entity that incorporates all their previous adaptations." Commander Veltar studied the data with his species' mathematical precision. The energy signatures suggest a construct approximately the size of a small moon, with the adaptive capabilities of the entire swarm concentrated into one organism. "A boss fight," Sergeant Nam Ki-jun observed. "Sir, this is starting to feel like one of those video games where you spend the whole time learning how to beat small enemies, then the final boss shows up with all their powers combined." Admiral Zekthara looked grim. "Our combined fleets could barely handle individual creatures. A single entity with all their adaptations would be—" He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Unbeatable," General Mordock completed. "By conventional standards, such an opponent would be undefeatable." Captain Tejo had been unusually quiet during the briefing. Now he spoke up, his voice thoughtful. "What if we don't try to beat it?" The room fell silent. "Captain, Admiral," Zekthara said carefully, "are you suggesting surrender?" "No, sir. I'm suggesting we think about this differently. Everyone's been asking, how do we defeat this thing? But what if that's the wrong question?" Chief Yang Jinwoo leaned forward with interest. "What's the right question, Captain?" "What does it want?" Dr. Choi looked puzzled. "Sir, it's a consuming organism. It wants to absorb and assimilate all technology and biological matter in the galaxy." "But why?" Tejo pressed. "What's the purpose? What happens after it's consumed everything?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. For months, everyone had focused on stopping the Void Swarm without ever asking what motivated it. Over the next week, the Bulldog conducted a series of reconnaissance missions to the edge of Void territory. Instead of engaging enemy forces, they observed and recorded behavior patterns. What they discovered changed everything. "Captain," Dr. Choi reported after analyzing hours of sensor data, "I think the Void entities aren't trying to destroy civilization. They're trying to preserve it." The senior staff gathered in the ship's modest conference room as Dr. Choi presented her theory. "Look at their absorption patterns," she said, displaying holographic recordings. "They don't just consume technology. They catalog and preserve it. Every ship they absorb, every weapon system they encounter becomes part of their collective memory." Lieutenant Park studied the data. "You're saying they're like a galactic library?" "More than that. Based on these patterns, I believe the original Void Swarm encountered some kind of existential threat, something that destroyed their home galaxy. They've been traveling between galaxies ever since, preserving the knowledge and capabilities of every civilization they encounter." Commander Oh Hee-jin frowned. "But sir, they're still destroying entire star systems." "Are they?" Dr. Choi manipulated the display to show long-range scans of previously consumed systems. "Look closer. The matter isn't being destroyed. It's being reorganized. They're converting entire systems into some kind of vast computational matrix." The implications were staggering. The Void Swarm wasn't an invading army. It was a desperate refugee fleet trying to preserve the knowledge of countless dead civilizations. "So, what do we do with this information?" Tejo asked. "We talk to them," Dr. Choi said simply. Admiral Zekthara was skeptical when Tejo presented the plan. "Captain, these entities have shown no interest in communication. Every attempt at contact has been ignored." "Because we've been trying to negotiate like diplomats or threaten them like soldiers," Tejo replied. "What if we approach them like humans?" The final confrontation took place in the Void Heart system, where the merged entity had grown to massive proportions. It hung in space like a dark planet, its surface rippling with the absorbed technology of a The success at Nexus Sector marked a turning point in the war, but it also created an unexpected problem. Word of the humans, chaotic tactics spread throughout the galaxy, and suddenly every species wanted to adopt random warfare as their new strategy. The results were catastrophic. Captain Taiho received an emergency communication from Admiral Zekthara, while the Bulldog was resupplying at Deep Station 7, a massive orbital facility that served as the combined fleet's main logistics hub. Captain, we have a serious situation. The Admiral's image flickered on the main screen. The Hegemony 4th Fleet attempted to replicate your tactics at the Outer Rim colonies. They accidentally conquered 3 of their own systems. How do you accidentally conquer 3-star systems? Lieutenant Park asked, by being really bad at being random, apparently. Admiral Zekthara replied with what sounded like a headache. They developed a systematic approach to chaos, created standardized random behavior protocols, and assigned specialists to manage their unpredictability. Dr. Choi Min-jung looked up from her research station. Admiral, that is not random behavior. That is organized randomness, which is exactly what the void entities can adapt to. The situation was worse than anyone had initially realized. Across the galaxy, military forces were trying to weaponize chaos through careful planning and precise execution. The elegant Altarians had created beautiful mathematical models of random behavior. The psychic ethereals were using probability engines to generate optimized unpredictability. All of it was completely missing the point. Sir Communications Officer Kim Yoon-seo announced, "We are receiving distress calls from the 7th Sector. The local defense forces are requesting immediate assistance." The tactical display showed a disaster in progress. 3 different Allied fleets were operating in the same system, each attempting their own version of human tactics. The results were complete chaos, but the wrong kind of chaos. Ships were colliding with each other, firing at friendly targets, and generally creating exactly the kind of organized disorder that the void entities could predict and counter. Meanwhile, a massive void swarm force had entered the system and was systematically destroying the confused Allied forces. All ships, Taiho announced over the fleet communications. "This is Captain Kim aboard the Bulldog. We are moving to assist the 7th Sector defense. All Allied vessels, please maintain standard formations and conventional tactics." Sir Ensign Lee looked confused. Should they not be using random tactics like us? No. Taiho replied firmly. They should be doing what they are good at. We will handle the random part. Chief Yang Jinwoo was already warming up the engines. "Captain, that is a lot of enemy ships. Even for us, this might be pushing it." "Maybe," Taiho acknowledged. "But I have an idea. What if we don't try to be random this time?" The crew stared at him in confusion. "Explain, Sir Commander." O'Higgin requested. Taiho pulled up the tactical display showing the battle in 7th Sector. "Look at this mess. Everyone is trying so hard to be unpredictable that they have created a new kind of pattern. The pattern of trying not to have patterns. The void entities are adapting to that." Dr. Choi's eyes widened with understanding. "You want to be deliberately predictable." "Exactly. We will do something so obviously human, so stereotypically straightforward, that it will catch them completely off guard." Sergeant Nam Kijun grinned. "Sir, what is the most predictable thing humans do in a fight? We charge straight at the enemy and punch them in the face." Lieutenant Park answered immediately. But Sir Ensign Lee protested. "That is exactly what they will expect from a human ship, will they?" Taiho asked. "Everyone in the galaxy thinks we are unpredictable chaos masters now. The last thing they will expect is for us to act like a normal military vessel." The Bulldog dropped out of hyperspace in the middle of the 7th Sector battle, and immediately every ship in the system, Allied and enemy alike, paused to see what the legendary human vessel would do. Instead of the expected chaotic maneuvers, the Bulldog formed up in a perfect military formation and began broadcasting standard tactical communications on open channels. "This is UES Bulldog to all Allied vessels. We are implementing battle plan Omega 77. All ships form on our position for coordinated assault." The Allied fleets, desperate for any kind of leadership, immediately began organizing into proper military formations. The void creatures, now completely adapted to chaos and randomness, were suddenly faced with textbook military tactics, executed with boring precision. "Target the command vessel," Taiho ordered. "Fire concentrated volleys at predetermined intervals." Sir Chief Yang asked quietly, Are we really going to fight normally? Absolutely not. Taiho smiled. But they don't know that. The Bulldog opened fire with perfectly ordinary kinetic rounds following standard engagement protocols. The lead void creature, expecting chaos and randomness, had adapted its defenses for unpredictable attacks. The straightforward military barrage punched right through its confused adaptive systems as the enemy formations began to collapse under the unexpected conventional assault. Taiho gave his real order. Now all ships execute your specialties. Altarians give them your best mathematical precision. Hegemony forces show them military excellence. Ethereals hit them with coordinated psychic strikes. Stop trying to be like us and start being yourselves. The combined fleet attacked with renewed confidence, each species utilizing their natural strengths instead of trying to copy human unpredictability. The Altarians. Perfect formations cut through enemy lines like crystalline blades. The Hegemony's disciplined firepower systematically eliminated targets. The Ethereal's mental coordination allowed for flawless tactical integration, and in the middle of it all, the Bulldog suddenly reverted to pure chaos, launching garbage, playing loud music, and generally behaving like a drunken space Viking. The void creatures adapted for either pure chaos or pure order, could not handle the sudden mixture of both. Their biological computers overloaded, trying to process perfectly executed military tactics happening simultaneously. With complete anarchistic behavior, within hours the 7th sector was secure. Captain Kim, Admiral Zektharas, voice carried deep respect. You have just demonstrated something remarkable. The strength of our alliance is not that we all fight the same way, but that we all fight differently. Taiho nodded. Everyone has their role. Admiral, we are just really good at being the crazy ones. The lesson was clear. Human tactics worked for humans because humans were naturally chaotic, unpredictable, and slightly insane. When other species tried to copy human behavior, they lost their own natural advantages. The key to victory was not for everyone to act like humans, but for everyone to be themselves, while the humans provided the chaos that kept the enemy off balance. Chief Yang was already planning modifications to their garbage cannon. Sir, I have been thinking about our ammunition supplies. What if we started collecting debris from allied ships? Different species, different technologies, more variety in our random projectiles. Dr. Choi looked thoughtful. Captain, that might actually improve our effectiveness. The more diverse our ammunition, the harder it becomes for the enemy to adapt. Sergeant Nam raised his hand. Sir, does this mean we get to collect alien garbage now? This is the best war ever, as the Bulldog prepared to rejoin the main fleet. Taiho reflected on what they had accomplished. They had not just found a way to fight the Void Swarm. They had reminded the galaxy that diversity was strength, and that sometimes the best solution came from being exactly who you were meant to be, even if who you were meant to be was completely insane. The victory at the front line sent shockwaves through both the combined fleet and the Void Swarm. While the Galactic Alliance celebrated intelligence reports indicated that the enemy was pulling back to their core territories, presumably to develop new adaptations, Captain Taiho found himself summoned to the flagship for a formal strategy conference. The holographic war room now displayed detailed projections of the Void Swarm's retreat patterns analyzed by the galaxy's most sophisticated military computers. The enemy is regrouping in the Nexus sector, Admiral Zekthara explained, highlighting a dense cluster of systems. Our analysts believe they are attempting to synthesize our random projectile tactics into their adaptive matrix. Commander Veltar manipulated the holographic display with graceful gestures. Our quantum probability engine suggests that within 7 standard rotations, they will develop effective countermeasures to chaotic ammunition patterns. Then we need to hit them before they figure it out, General Mordock stated bluntly. Taiho studied the tactical display while munching on a protein bar that made several alien officers visibly uncomfortable. The Nexus sector was a natural fortress with asteroid fields, gravitational anomalies, and the remnants of an ancient civilization's defensive platforms. What is the conventional approach, he asked. A coordinated assault with our fastest ships, Veltar explained. Strike hard and fast before they complete their adaptations. However, casualty projections are significant. The display showed elegant attack vectors, carefully calculated approach routes, and synchronized firing solutions. It was military science at its finest, and it would probably get half the fleet destroyed, Captain, Kim Admiral Zekthara said formally. High Command is requesting that you lead the advance elements with your unconventional methods. Unconventional, Tejo repeated thoughtfully. Sir, that might be our problem. We are still thinking like military officers. I'm not sure I understand, the Admiral replied. Back on the Bulldog, Tejo gathered his crew in the mess hall. The room smelled like coffee and industrial lubricant, a combination that had become oddly comforting. All right, people, he began the brain trust. Wants us to lead an assault on the enemy's main base. Conventional wisdom says we go in fast and hard, hit them before they adapt. Chief Yang Jinwu looked skeptical. But sir, conventional wisdom is exactly what these things adapt to. They are probably expecting a standard military assault. Exactly. Tejo smiled. So what if we don't give them one ensign? Lee. Minho raised his hand. Sir, what is the opposite of a coordinated military assault? A complete disaster, suggested Lieutenant Parka, riot commander. Oh, He-jin corrected. Unplanned, chaotic, no central coordination. Dr. Choi Min-jung looked up from her research tablet. Captain, I have been analyzing the enemy adaptation patterns. They respond most effectively to organized threats. They can identify command. Structures predict tactical patterns, counter strategic planning. But their response time degrades significantly when faced with truly random actions. Tejo leaned back in his chair. So what you are telling me is that the best way to fight the most sophisticated enemy in the galaxy is to act like a bunch of drunk college students. Sir Sergeant Nam Ki-jun grinned. I was drunk college student, I can teach everyone. The plan that emerged over the next few hours would have given military strategists nightmares. Instead of a coordinated assault, the Bulldog would approach the Nexus sector alone, taking a random, meandering path through the asteroid fields. They would fire at whatever caught their attention, change course without warning, and generally behave in the most unprofessional manner possible. The key, Tejo explained to his officers, is that we don't have a plan, because if we don't know what we are doing, how can they possibly adapt to it? Admiral Zekthara was horrified when Tejo presented the strategy, Captain. You are proposing to enter hostile territory with no tactical plan, no predetermined objectives, and no coordination with supporting elements. That is right, sir. We are going to wing it completely. This is madness. Yes, sir. That is what makes it brilliant. The Bulldog entered the Nexus sector 3 days later, traveling at a leisurely pace and broadcasting human music at full volume. The playlist ranged from classical symphonies to heavy metal, adding another layer of chaos to their approach. The void creatures initially tried to respond with their usual tactics, positioning defensive formations and preparing adaptive countermeasures, but the human ship's behavior defied all military logic. First, the Bulldog stopped to examine an interesting asteroid formation, spending 20 minutes scanning rocks that had no tactical value. Then it suddenly accelerated toward a seemingly random enemy position, fired a salvo of garbage, and immediately veered off to investigate what appeared to be the wreckage of an ancient space station. Contact. Bearing 27 Mark 15 Communications Officer Kim Yun-seo reported, Ooh. That one looks angry. Ensign Lee observed, studying the approaching void creature. Should we shoot? It might as well, Tejo shrugged. They opened fire with a mixture of conventional ammunition and random debris, including what appeared to be someone's lunch and a broken exercise bike from the ship's gym. The void creature's hull rippled frantically as it tried to analyze the incoming projectiles, then gave up and began evasive maneuvers. Sir, it is running away, Lieutenant Park reported with amazement. Makes sense. Chief Yang nodded. If someone started shooting random garbage at you while playing loud music, you would probably run too. The pattern continued for hours. The Bulldog wandered through the enemy's territory like a dangerous tourist, stopping to admire the scenery, taking random pot shots at anything that moved, and generally behaving like the galaxy's most unpredictable threat. The void creatures evolved for efficiency and adaptation, simply could not cope with such chaotic behavior. Their formations dissolved as individual entities tried to predict the humans' next move. Some attempted to flee, others tried to adapt to musical frequencies, and several appeared to suffer what could only be described as nervous breakdowns. Dr. Choi was recording everything. Captain, the enemy collective intelligence is fragmenting individual entities, are making contradictory adaptive choices. Their biological computers cannot process truly random behavior patterns. Chief Yang was having the time of his life. Sir, the enemy formation on our starboard side appears to be trying to adapt to our playlist. Should we switch to something more confusing? What is more confusing than human music? Tai-ho asked. Sergeant Nam had an idea. Sir, what if we broadcast multiple songs simultaneously? Within minutes, the Bulldog was transmitting a chaotic mixture of classical, music, heavy metal folk songs, and what appeared to be a cooking show. The void creature's responses became increasingly erratic as they tried to adapt to cultural information that made no logical sense. By the end of the day, the Bulldog had single-handedly disrupted the entire Nexus Sector defensive network without firing a single coordinated shot. The enemy positions were in complete disarray with individual creatures scattered across the system, in various states of confusion, Admiral Tai-ho reported back to the fleet. The enemy positions are in complete disarray. I think they are having some kind of existential crisis. Admiral Zekthar's response was a mixture of admiration and despair. Captain Kim, you have just demonstrated that 3 millennia of military science can be defeated by aggressive incompetence. Thank you, sir. We do our best. The Nexus Sector. Victory proved that chaos was not just a tactic for humans, it was a way of life, and when properly applied, human chaos could break even the most adaptive enemy in the galaxy. 3 weeks later, the UES Bulldog approached the front lines where the remnants of the combined Galactic fleet maintained a desperate defensive perimeter. The sight that greeted them was heartbreaking. Beautiful alien warships hung in space like broken sculptures, their elegant hulls scarred by weapons that seemed to grow and writhe even in the vacuum of space. Admiral Zekthara of the Altarian command ship, Starweaver, opened communications immediately. Captain Kim, you must maintain distance. The void entities adapt to any weapon system within minutes of first contact. We have lost 17 ships trying to establish effective engagement ranges. Through the view screen, Tai-ho could see the enemy. The void swarm ships defied easy description. They were part machine and part organism, constantly shifting and evolving. They moved through space like schools of predatory fish, their hulls rippling with captured technology from a dozen different species. Understood, Admiral Tai-ho replied, requesting permission to observe enemy behavior patterns. While the sophisticated alien vessels maintained careful distance using long-range sensors and quantum analysis equipment, the Bulldog took a characteristically direct approach. Ensign Lee Minho launched a simple probe which was basically just a camera duct taped to a rocket engine. Sir, reported Communications Officer Kim Yoon-seo. The probe is transmitting visual data. The enemy ships are beautiful in a terrifying way. On the screen, the void entities moved with liquid grace as they watched one of the creatures absorb the probe, its hull briefly glowing as it processed the new technology. Within minutes, similar probes began emerging from the creature's surface, scouting in all directions. Fascinating, murmured Science Officer Dr. Choi Min-jung. They don't just adapt to weapons, they integrate any technology they encounter. No wonder conventional tactics have failed. Chief Engineer Yang Jin-woo scratched his head. So they're like galactic magpies. They see something shiny and steal it. More than that, Dr. Choi explained. They improve on what they steal. Our probe had a range of 50,000 kilometers. Theirs appear to have twice that capability already. As if summoned by their conversation, 3 void entities detached from the main swarm and approached the defensive perimeter. The Allied fleet immediately powered up weapon systems, their ships' hulls glowing with charged energy arrays. The first exchange was brief and decisive. Altarian plasma beams struck the lead creature, which absorbed the energy and immediately began sprouting similar weapon systems along its flanks. Hegemony missile volleys were intercepted by organic point defense systems that the creatures grew in real time. Within minutes, the void ships were firing back with improved versions of every weapon used against them. All ships fall back to secondary positions, Admiral Zekthara ordered as his fleet retreated in good order. But Captain Tai-ho had a different idea. Chief Yang, warm up the main guns. Sir Lieutenant Park looked concerned. We have just seen what happens when they are engaged with conventional weapons. Those weren't conventional weapons. Tai-ho replied. Those were sophisticated weapons. There's a difference. The Bulldog moved forward, its massive engines pushing the ungainly vessel toward the approaching void entities. The alien commanders watched in horror as the human ship broke formation. Captain Kim, Admiral Zektheris' voice was tight with concern. Please reconsider. Those entities have already adapted to plasma and missile technology. Your kinetic weapons will be similarly absorbed. With respect, Admiral Tejo replied, they have adapted to your weapons. Let's see how they handle ours. The HFY lead void creature, now bristling with stolen alien technology, approached the Bulldog with confidence. Its hull rippled as it prepared to absorb whatever exotic energies the humans might throw at it. Instead, the Bulldog opened fire with its main gun. The weapon was absurdly simple. It was an electromagnetic rail system that accelerated a solid tungsten slug to a significant percentage of light speed. No exotic particles, no quantum entanglement, no sophisticated targeting systems. Just Newton's laws of motion applied with extreme prejudice. The slug punched through the void creature's adaptive hull like it wasn't there, continuing through the organism's core and out the other side. The creature convulsed, its stolen technology flickering and dying as catastrophic structural damage overwhelmed its ability to adapt. The remaining two entities paused, seemingly confused. Their hulls rippled as they tried to process what had just happened. How do you adapt to being hit by what amounts to a very fast rock? Again, Tejo ordered. The second creature died the same way as the first. The third began to retreat, but Commander O'Heejin had already calculated its trajectory. Target locked, sir. Firing solution ready. Fire. The third slug found its mark, and suddenly the front lines were quiet. Across the communication channels, alien voices buzzed with astonishment. These creatures had adapted to every sophisticated weapon system in the galaxy, but somehow a primitive kinetic projectile had punched right through their defenses. How Admiral Zektheris' voice was filled with wonder. Tejo grinned. Admiral, sometimes the best way to open a can is with a can opener, but if you don't have a can opener, a big enough hammer works just fine. The victory sent shockwaves through both fleets. The aliens had spent months trying increasingly complex solutions to the Void Swarm problem. Meanwhile, the humans had simply decided to hit them really hard with very fast rocks. Chief Yang was already running diagnostics on the railgun system. Sir, all systems nominal, ready for continuous fire. Dr. Choi was analyzing the wreckage of the destroyed creatures. Captain, the debris shows interesting patterns. Their adaptive matrices seem to require a minimum complexity threshold to function effectively. Simple kinetic impact may fall below that threshold. So you're saying they're too smart for their own good? Sergeant Nam observed, in a manner of speaking. Yes, Dr. Choi replied. Their evolutionary advantage becomes a disadvantage when faced with sufficiently primitive attacks. Lieutenant Park was monitoring long-range sensors. Sir, more contacts approaching. Looks like a larger group this time. Tejo studied the tactical display showing dozens of red dots moving toward their position. All ships. This is Captain Kim. The enemy is responding to our engagement. Recommend all vessels prepare for extended combat operations. Admiral Zekthera responded immediately. Captain Kim, your vessel will take point position. The combined fleet will provide support. Roger. That Admiral Tejo replied. Chief Yang, prepare for continuous engagement. Ensign Lee, monitor ammunition stores. Commander O, plot firing solutions for multiple targets. As the Bulldog prepared for its second engagement with the Void Swarm, the crew worked with calm efficiency. They had found something that worked, and now they were going to use it until it stopped working. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most advanced solution to a complex problem was to go back to basics, and few things were more basic than throwing rocks at your enemies until they stopped moving. Captain Kim Tejo looked at his new ship through the window and felt his heart sink. The UES Bulldog was the ugliest warship he had ever seen in his entire life, while other alien races built sleek, beautiful vessels that looked like silver arrows. Cutting through space, the humans had apparently decided that pretty was overrated. The ship looked like someone had taken a freight train and welded it to a brick, then painted the whole thing army green. The hull was thick steel plating that somehow managed to look rusty even though they were floating in the vacuum of space. Instead of elegant energy weapons, the ship had massive kinetic cannons sticking out from every surface like the quills on an angry porcupine. The engine section was 3 times bigger than it should be because humans believed that if you were going to go fast, you might as well go really, really fast. Lieutenant Park So-young walked up to him carrying the crew manifest. She tried to keep her face neutral, but Tai-ho could. See, she was thinking the same thing he was. This ship was embarrassing. The ship has been assigned to work with the Galactic Council fleet. She told him. The alien representatives are here for the inspection. The aliens who came aboard were impressive. Commander Veltar of the Altarian Navy moved like flowing water. His crystalline body caught the harsh fluorescent lights of the human corridors. Behind him, General Mordok of the Hegemony Forces looked around with barely hidden disgust. The human ship was cramped and utilitarian. Everything was painted the same boring gray color. "This is your flagship?" Veltar asked in his musical voice, but the tone was clearly mocking. "Captain Kim, surely this is some kind of human joke." Tae-ho led them to the bridge where Ensign Lee Min-ho was enthusiastically explaining the weapons to anyone who would listen. The young officer was excited about everything on the ship. See, instead of those fancy plasma arrays, we just shoot really big bullets, really, really fast, he said cheerfully. "Sometimes we shoot lots of little bullets even faster. It's simple, but it works." "Great." General Mordok examined a control panel that looked like it belonged in a factory rather than a starship. "These interfaces are so primitive," he said. "No neural links, no quantum processing matrices. How do you expect to compete in modern space warfare with such crude technology?" Chief Engineer Yang Jinwoo overheard the comment and grinned. "Well, sir, when something breaks, we can fix it with basic tools instead of waiting 6 months for specialized quantum technicians. Plus, our stuff actually works when the enemy tries to jam our systems with fancy electronic warfare." As the inspection continued, the aliens became more and more amused. The human ship had no elegant solutions and no sophisticated strategies. Where other warships had meditation chambers for psychic warfare specialists, the Bulldog had a gym filled with weights and punching bags. Instead of advanced AI tactical computers, they had Commander Oh Hyejin, hunched over paper charts calculating missile trajectories with old-fashioned math. Captain Veltar said as they finished the tour, "I must ask, does Earth High Command seriously believe this vessel can contribute meaningfully to our defensive efforts against the Void Swarm?" The Void Swarm had appeared 6 months ago at the galaxy's edge, consuming everything in their path. Their ships were living organisms that had evolved for perfect efficiency. They could absorb energy. Weapons adapt to new tactics within hours and convert defeated vessels into more of their own kind. Every major galactic power had lost entire fleets trying to stop them with conventional warfare. Tai-ho straightened his shoulders. "Sir, I know we don't look like much, but humans have a different way of thinking about problems. Sometimes the dumbest solution is the one nobody sees coming." As the alien dignitaries left the ship, clearly unconvinced, Tai-ho gathered his crew in the mess hall. "Lieutenant," Park pulled up the tactical display showing the Void Swarm's relentless advance. Dozens of red markers crept across the galactic map like a spreading infection. "They think we're idiots," Sergeant Nam Ki-jun observed while munching on synthesized protein, bars that would probably horrify the sophisticated palates of their allies. "Maybe we are," Tai-ho replied. "But we're the kind of idiots who figured out how to split atoms by banging rocks together. And now we get to see what happens when unstoppable force meets immovable stupidity." The crew laughed, but there was steel in their voices. They had all seen the reports from the front lines. Entire civilizations had been wiped out, and their greatest warships converted into twisted mockeries of living. Metal and flesh, the galaxy's most brilliant military minds had failed to find any solution. The Altarians had tried mathematical precision, calculating perfect firing solutions and optimal engagement ranges. The Void creatures had absorbed their quantum computers and started using better math. The Hegemony had attempted brute force, overwhelming firepower, and disciplined tactics. The creatures had grown thicker armor and learned military strategy. The Ethereal Collective had used psychic warfare and probability manipulation. The Void entities had developed mental shields and started predicting the future. Every sophisticated approach had failed. Every elegant solution had been turned against its creators. The galaxy was running out of ideas and running out of time, but humans had never been particularly sophisticated or elegant. They were the species that had crawled out of caves and somehow built spaceships. They were the ones who had looked at the impossible and decided to try anyway. They were too stubborn to know when they were beaten and too stupid to realize when something couldn't be done. The bulldog might be ugly and primitive and embarrassing, but it was also something the galaxy had never seen before. It was a warship built by a species that had learned to solve problems by hitting them with bigger hammers. When finesse failed, humans tried force. When force failed, they tried more force. When more force failed, they got creative about applying force time. To try the dumbest approach possible, Taiho said. The crew of the Bulldog had no idea they were about to change the course of galactic history. They just knew they had a job to do, and they were going to do it the only way they knew how, the human way. As the ship prepared to join the combined fleet at the front lines, Chief Yang made final adjustments to the weapons systems. The kinetic cannons were loaded and ready. The engines were running at full power. The coffee was brewing in the galley. Everything was ready for humanity's first real test in galactic warfare. The aliens expected them to fail spectacularly, and they were probably right. But sometimes being spectacularly wrong in exactly the right way was all you needed. The Void Swarm had adapted to every form of sophisticated warfare the galaxy could throw at them. But they had never encountered anything quite like human stupidity. And human stupidity, when properly applied, could be a terrifying thing indeed. Word of the human victory spread through the combined fleet like wildfire, but the celebration was short-lived. Within hours-long range, sensors detected massive movement in the Void Swarm's territory. The entities were repositioning, clearly preparing for something big. Dr. Choi Min-jung worked frantically at her sensors, analyzing data streams from the front lines. Captain, I am detecting structural changes in the enemy formations. They are growing thicker. Armor, plating. Makes sense. Chief Engineer Yang Jinwoo nodded approvingly. If someone keeps shooting holes in you, you get thicker skin. Basic Engineering Admiral Zekthara convened an emergency strategy meeting aboard his flagship. The holographic conference room filled with the galaxy's greatest military minds, crystalline Altarians with their perfect mathematical precision warrior caste, hegemony generals with their tactical computers, and the psychic ethereal collective representatives with their probability engines. The situation has evolved, the Admiral began. Captain Kim's kinetic weapons proved effective initially, but the enemy is adapting. Our xenobiology teams estimate that within 72 hours the void entities will have developed armor sufficient to deflect even the humans' railgun projectiles. Captain Taiho sat at the table looking distinctly out of place among the sophisticated alien commanders. His uniform was practical rather than ceremonial, and he carried a simple paper notebook instead of quantum data tablets. Logical response is to increase projectile velocity, suggested Commander Velter. Perhaps we could modify your weapon systems with our gravitic acceleration technology, or add exotic matter cores to your ammunition, offered General Mordock. Our quantum-enhanced projectiles could phase through their armor adaptations. Taiho listened politely, then shook his head. Respectfully, sirs, if we make our weapons more sophisticated, they will just adapt to sophistication. We need to go the other direction. The ethereal representative's mental voice carried confusion. You wish to make your weapons less effective. I want to make them simpler. Taiho explained. See, everyone has been trying to outthink these creatures. But what if the answer isn't to think harder? Back aboard the Bulldog, the human crew gathered for an impromptu planning session. The ship's recreation room with its metal folding chairs and coffee-stained tables served as their war room. Okay. Taiho addressed his officers. They are adapting to kinetic weapons. What is simpler than shooting a metal slug really fast? Ensign Lee Minho raised his hand enthusiastically. Shooting lots of metal slugs really fast better. Commander Oh Hyejin added. But they will just adapt to multiple impacts. Chief Yang Jinwoo was quiet for a moment, then started grinning. Captain, what if we don't shoot metal at all? Explain. Well, sir, they adapt to whatever hits them right. They analyze the material composition, the energy signatures, all that fancy stuff. But what if we shot something they can't adapt to because there is nothing to analyze, Doctor? Choi looked intrigued. What did you have in mind? Yang Jinwoo stood up and walked to the viewport, gesturing at the debris field from yesterday's battle. See, all that wreckage out there. Broken hull plates, destroyed equipment, random chunks of stuff. What if we just shot that at them? The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Garbage. Lieutenant Park said slowly. You want to shoot garbage at them, not just garbage. Yang Jinwoo's excitement grew. Random garbage. No consistent material composition. No uniform shape or mass. No predictable characteristics. How do you adapt to pure randomness? Sergeant Nam. Kijun laughed. Sir, that might be the dumbest idea I have ever heard. I love it. Over the next 48 hours, the Bulldog became the galaxy's first military garbage truck. The crew worked tirelessly, welding together a new weapon system that would have horrified any respectable military engineer. Instead of precision-manufactured projectiles, they loaded their railguns with random debris, chunks of hull plating, broken machinery, twisted metal, even some of Sergeant Nam's expired ration packs. The sophisticated alien allies watched in bewilderment as the human ship test fired its new ammunition. The projectiles tumbled chaotically through space, no two identical in shape, mass, or trajectory. Captain Kim Admiral Zekthara called, our targeting computers cannot calculate effective hit probabilities with such irregular projectiles. That is kind of the point, Sir Taiho replied. If we can't predict where they will hit, neither can the enemy. When the void entities finally attacked, they came in a massive wave, their hulls now gleaming with thick armor, plating. The creature ships moved with confidence, having adapted to the humans' previous tactics. The Bulldog opened fire. The first salvo was a masterpiece of chaos. Chunks of debris spinning through space in completely unpredictable patterns. Some pieces struck the lead creatures head-on. Others tumbled past harmlessly, still others ricocheted off armor plating and struck different targets entirely. The void entities tried desperately to adapt, their hulls rippling as they attempted to analyze the incoming projectiles. But there was nothing consistent to analyze. Each piece of garbage had different mass composition and flight characteristics. Worse. Yet for the creatures, some of the debris was their own destroyed vessels from previous battles. They found themselves trying to adapt to technology they had already absorbed, creating recursive loops that overloaded their biological computers. All ships, Taiho announced over the fleet communications, commence Operation Dumpster Fire. The rest of the combined fleet watched in amazement as the most primitive weapons in galactic history systematically demolished the most adaptive enemy they had ever faced. The void creatures writhed in confusion, unable to develop effective countermeasures against what was essentially a space-based food fight. Lieutenant Park monitored the enemy formations. Sir, their coordination is breaking down. Individual entities are trying to adapt to different debris types simultaneously. Their collective intelligence appears to be fragmenting. Dr. Choi was recording everything. Captain, this is remarkable. The creature's evolutionary advantage requires pattern recognition. When faced with true randomness, their adaptive systems enter recursive failure. States. Chief. Yang was enjoying himself immensely. Sir, request permission to launch the special ammunition. What special ammunition? Taiho asked. Yang grinned and gestured to a pile of objects near the loading mechanism. Sir, you know how Sergeant Nam has been complaining about the food in the commissary. The next salvo included expired military rations, outdated equipment manuals, broken exercise equipment, and what appeared to be someone's collection of music recordings. The void creatures' responses became increasingly erratic as they tried to process the cultural and nutritional information contained in human garbage. One creature appeared to be attempting to adapt to the concept of elevator music. Another was trying to incorporate the molecular structure of processed cheese food into its hull plating. A third seemed to be having an existential crisis after absorbing a self-help book. As the last of the attacking creatures fell apart under the barrage of random junk, Admiral Zekthara's voice carried a note of profound respect. Captain Kim, in 3,000 years of recorded galactic warfare, this is the most brilliantly stupid strategy I have ever witnessed. Taiho smiled. Thank you, sir. We like to think outside the box. usually because we forgot to bring the box in the first place. The victory at the front lines proved that sometimes the best solution to an impossible problem was to stop trying to be clever and start trying to be ridiculous. The Void Swarm had evolved to counter sophistication, intelligence, and advanced technology, but nobody had ever taught them how to deal with weaponized stupidity.